Hello and welcome to the Armenian News Network, Groong Week in Review. This show was recorded on June 12, 2023. I'm Asbed Bedrossian, and I'm here together with Hovik Manucharyan. Here are the topics we have today. As Erdogan's third term as president gets off the ground, he has reshuffled his cabinet thoroughly. What does this portend for Armenia and the region? The Armenian-Azeri so-called peace negotiations continue. Azerbaijan postponed a meeting of the foreign ministers in Washington today, and there seemed to be no agreement on how to proceed with border negotiations. There are some economic developments afoot, and we wanted to talk about those. The government has offered subsidies to the IT sector. Western sanctions on Russia are starting to affect Armenia, and there are negotiations or just talk about a new nuclear power plant. We'll talk about those politics a little bit. Finally, a new MPG poll is out, and it shows that the public is undeniably opposed to key Pashinyan policies. To talk about these issues, we have with us Hrant Mikaelian, who is a political scientist and multidisciplinary researcher in social sciences based in Yerevan. He is also a senior researcher at the Caucasus Institute. Hey, Hrant, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Welcome back, Hrant.
Thank you.
Hrant, the elections in Turkey are over, and we're of course looking for a deeper dive into this topic with the Turkologist, but since we have you here and it's fresh on our mind, we just wanted to let our listeners know that Erdogan's first visit will be to Azerbaijan, and the entire cabinet was reshuffled, but a few key appointments sort of stoked my interest. One is that of Hakan Fidan, who was the former MIT chief, former the intelligence power in Turkey. He was appointed as foreign minister, and there is a lot of news that he's being groomed as a replacement for Erdogan. And he's probably in the Turkish politics one of the closest figures to Erdogan. In his acceptance speech, he used the Ottoman term for foreign ministry, the term harciye instead of dışişleri, which is the modern Turkish way to say the foreign ministry. So that was interesting. And Ibrahim Kalin, who was Erdogan's former spokesperson, was appointed Hakan Fidan's old job, which is intelligence chief. So they have some rotating chairs going on. And I believe Ibrahim Kalin's former thesis was on Armenia. So we have at least two people in the government who are very close, who know Armenia inside and out, probably. Overall, what's your assessment of the results, and how do you think Erdogan's third term as president will affect Armenia?
Okay, let me add also to the list Yaşar Güler, who has been head of General Staff of Turkey.
Yes.
And now is Minister of Defense. And it also refers to Armenia and Azerbaijan. He was also a participant of anti-Armenian war in 2020. So, generally, Erdogan, first of all, he is appointing people who he trusts the most. Both Hakan Fidan and his former spokesperson are people who are very trusted. And also we see very big attention towards, these foreign related activities. So I think the foreign expansionism, which has been one of his main directions previously, will gain even more attention in the future. So generally, I think we might have troubles in the future if we don't react quickly. And Turkey is going to gather all resources to double down on its new Ottoman policy. Yeah, and at the same time, Turkey is trying to rebuild bridges with the West, because, first of all, some people who have made very radical anti-Western statements, like Süleyman Soylu, who has been Minister of Interior, has been dismissed, and some people who are, let's say, more acceptable for the West have been appointed to the new government. So I think there is already some level of agreement and mutual understanding with the U.S. leadership, although I don't think Biden and his administration likes Erdogan, but still I think they already got some level of agreement, and Erdogan has put a step back in his anti-Western rhetoric, which appeared to be mostly the pre-electoral game. So generally, Erdogan will try to stabilize his economy, finances, stabilize foreign relations, but still pursue its external activities, but not to the extent it will danger him. So Erdogan will not involve in conflict with Iran or Russia. That's obvious, and still try to maintain good relations with the West, and still will remain Western ally, key Western ally in the Middle East.
Do you see his policies towards Armenia shifting in any different direction?
No, direction will not change, I think, but some minor shifts might occur, but generally directions will not switch. And by the way, the direction is also dependent on Armenian governmental policies, which is already to talk about Pashinyan, which I hope we will have time to. But generally, we have seen how Pashinyan went there. And by the way, when Erdogan was listing the names of leaders of other countries who have visited his inauguration, he did not mention Pashinyan and Armenia, which is also a sign of level of humiliation Pashinyan got there and brought to Armenia. So I don't think there will be any change towards any good.
Okay, let's come to the Armenian-Azerbaijani continuing negotiations. This week was marked with continuing tensions on the border and shootings in Artsakh. Azerbaijan also postponed a scheduled meeting of the foreign ministers in Washington, D.C., which was due to take place today, actually, June 12th. Instead, Azerbaijani Foreign Minister Ceyhan Bayramov presented new reasons why Azerbaijan is not signing a peace agreement with Armenia. Very briefly, alleged Armenian military presence in Nagorno-Karabakh, Armenia, quote-unquote, hindering talks between Baku and Stepanakert, and also Armenia, quote-unquote, smearing Azerbaijan internationally. Pashinyan aide Arsene Torosyan brushed aside these excuses, and the U.S. ambassador to the OSCE, Michael Carpenter, also responded to Bayramov, saying that the U.S. believes that peace can only be achieved through dialogue and mutual understanding. Interestingly, he also mentioned that Nagorno-Karabakh should be provided with gas and electricity, although he didn't say who should provide this, and also said that free movement of goods and people should resume, quote, including through the Lachin corridor, unquote. There are also reports today that Azerbaijan may have postponed the meeting at the request of incoming Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan. This week, Erdogan will visit Azerbaijan, as Hovik mentioned a little earlier, and it's expected that the two countries will realign their coordinated strategies against Armenia as Erdogan's third term as president begins. Hrant, what do you think are the reasons for Azerbaijan postponing the meeting in Washington?
I don't know exact reasons because the negotiation process is not very transparent, but at least we can speculate that it might be connected to the Turkish elections. Why it is so? Because the only thing changed so far is Turkish government. There is also slightly changed situation in Ukraine because this time Ukrainian counteroffensive turned out to be not very successful, or in some directions even a total mess for Ukrainian attacking forces. Although we don't know how it will finish, but still perceptions of Russia have changed both in Ukraine and the West. So it might be that Russian position will be taken into account more. And as we know, Russia does not want these negotiations in US to go very far. But at the same time, there is Turkish governmental change, and we know that Turkey has affected negotiation process from Azerbaijani side from the very beginning, and in many cases they tried to hide it, but still they had a word to say, and had a very big effect on Azerbaijani decisions. So maybe Erdogan will try to somehow renew his policy, reshape, have new negotiations, or maybe give some time to his newly appointed foreign minister to get into his new position, to acquire new knowledge and so on, and pause the negotiations. That's what I think. And at the same time, we see that there is not much will on Azerbaijani and Turkish side to achieve any kind of final solution to the conflict. Instead, they are trying to keep this conflict and benefit from its existence rather than benefit from its, let's say, resolution.
That was going to be my question, Hrant. Is Azerbaijan and maybe by extension Turkey really interested in peace? Some of these excuses mentioned by Azerbaijan, such as smearing Azerbaijan internationally, and I think they're referring to Armenia's activities in the OSCE, or hindering discussions between Baku and Stepanakert, they seem to be basically like made up pretenses for stopping negotiations. Do you agree with that? I mean, do you think basically they're basically throwing out any reason they can to not negotiate? And also, I should mention for our listeners, we're talking about the so-called peace treaty. There's a separate track for negotiations, I guess, under Moscow's auspices around border demarcation, delimitation, transport corridors, and so forth. So it seems like there are also multiple tracks to these negotiations. So from these, which one is Azerbaijan interested in continuing, and which one is Azerbaijan stalling, or is it stalling on all directions?
First of all, we can hear from Azerbaijani authorities that they support Russian track. At the same time, we can hear that they support Western track, Brussels track of negotiations, Russian track on negotiations on transportation, Brussels track on negotiations on status. In reality, they support neither. They either would like to have direct negotiations, Turkey plus Azerbaijan versus Armenia, or not have any negotiations at all. Because any kind of final solution would imply that they stop aggression, but we don't see any direction, any idea in Azerbaijan to stop the aggression. So in reality, having the aggression, governing the aggression, or directing the aggression against Armenia is a way of structuring foreign relations of Azerbaijan. And this propaganda that Armenia hindering negotiation process, it's a complete mess. It's whenever they see Pashinyan is conceding, they are trying to get more. So as I say, the sense of taste comes during eating. Anyway, they want to get more, but at the same time, they don't want to have final agreement. So Azerbaijan has no goal in final agreement. Not just to mention that during the last 20 years, the only thing Azerbaijan was doing was to prepare for a new war. By the way, we learned some time ago that they are building new military hospital in Karvachar, so which might accept injured soldiers. And why should Azerbaijan have hundreds of injured soldiers in Karvachar? I don't know. So if they are not planning to attack, Armenia will definitely not attack Azerbaijan. Armenia at least is not in a position to talk to Azerbaijan from military point of view. But still, we have this threat. So generally, I think Azerbaijan does not want to have a final agreement. And also there is a big misagreement between Russia and the West of who should be the main negotiator.
Or moderator, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, speaking on the border negotiations specifically, Last week, we discussed how Pashinyan was signaling to Azerbaijan that the 1975 Soviet maps are an acceptable basis for border negotiations. We were surprised because these maps are not at all advantageous for Armenia. So we were wondering what Azerbaijan's position was. And some thought that maybe Azerbaijan would accept it, but officially Azerbaijan rejected this. And it turns out that Azeri press is discussing the Treaty of Batumi or Alexandropol, or even worse, the ridiculous claim of Baku from 1920, which lay claim to even more land in southern Armenia and basically 50% of Lake Sevan. As we know, during these past 3 years, Azerbaijan and Turkey have also officially welcomed and funded almost or fostered irredentist movements like the West Azerbaijan concept, the Zangezur and Goycha Republic, and so on and so forth. I believe there are other organizations that have been set up. Basically, anyone who wants to start an organization, they help or expedite that. So clearly, there is no agreement on maps. I want to repeat: Azerbaijan has rejected the 1975 maps to be used as a basis. So can we say that even the border negotiations are stalled?
Obviously. First of all, when we are referring to so-called Soviet maps, it's 1975 maps, because even after 1985, there was a negotiation between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which there was a commission which came to agreement that at least Sotk gold mine should have been passed towards Armenian control completely. And we have heard a couple of weeks before that it stopped functioning at all, this mine, because Azerbaijan.
Yeah, on the SOT maps, just hold your thought. On the SOT maps, I want to mention that we have, through our contacts who are very familiar with the process, when SOT was about to be privatized, the US Embassy did an assessment, and the US Embassy decided that all of SOT belonged to Armenia. And only then did they allow a US company to initially acquire SOT. So basically, the US recognizes SOT as part of Armenia. And here you are saying that Armenia is preferring the 1975 maps, which give half of SOT to Azerbaijan. So sorry for that interruption. I wanted to mention that.
Yeah, well, not only US, it was a Soviet commission between Armenia and Azerbaijani Soviet republics, which worked in 1985 to 1989, and they had agreement on some border issues, including Sotk, and Sotk should have completely 100% remained in Armenia. Given that since 1989 there was already a conflict, officially this commission work was not recognized, and no recognized borders existed between the countries since then. But still, there is an issue. Nowadays, formally, some 70 to 75% of Sot mine is under Azerbaijani control, and from Armenian side, the company which worked there, if I'm not mistaken, it's Geopro Mining, has stopped working. And it's a couple of percent of Armenian exports, and some 1,000 or even more working places, and so on.
And there's even secondary markets, because all of that gold is also being processed in, I think, by a company in Albovian, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, inside Armenia, which is also hundreds of jobs. So it's not just Geopro Mining that's being affected.
Right. So it's still very important, and Pashinyan agreed to work on 1975 maps, which is already a result of Azerbaijani diplomatic and demographic pressure during Soviet times, because we know Armenian territory, according to 1928 Soviet maps and encyclopedias, it was 31,400 square kilometers. And in the end of the Soviet Union, according to 1975 maps, it was 29,743 square kilometers. At the same time, if we are talking about so-called Alexandropol Treaty, which was, of course, huge mistake by that time Dashnak government. It was a complete mess. Armenia's territory was reduced to 11,000 square kilometers, and when this ultimatum was brought to Armenian side, Armenians said that it's not enough place to live there, and Turks said its official statement that it's a good enough place for a graveyard. So this is what Azerbaijan is talking now to. But anyway, we should be aware that Armenia will be in constant conflict with Azerbaijan and Turkey, at least during Erdogan and Aliyev regimes and their direct successors. Maybe if there is a regime change and ideological shift in Turkey and Azerbaijan, maybe then the conflict will be over. But Armenia did not start this conflict. Azerbaijan started it, and Azerbaijan don't want to stop it. So we should understand that we will be in this conflict. So the only thing we might change is change the efficiency of containment of Azerbaijan. The only thing we might change is the efficiency of Armenian security policy, not pleasing Azerbaijan. It's kind of Munich Treaty, which resulted in a total collapse of Czechia. But anyway, this shows that Azerbaijan does not want any kind of agreement with Armenia.
All right, Hrant, let's talk about some economic issues that are in the news. Most recently, I believe today, the Armenian government has decided to reduce taxes for the IT sector from 20% to just 5%. I mean, I'm very partial to this because I have tried to do IT business in Armenia in the past, but I wanted to ask you, is this a sound policy? Who is benefiting from this tax policy, which is basically a huge subsidy to IT companies in Armenia?
Let's start with the fact that IT companies already have big benefits in Armenia. One is that if you are a startup, you get a tax cut for the employees from 20 to 10% income tax. Another tax cut is that if your number of employees is less than 20, you don't pay the corporate tax. So it's another tax cut. And then there are new tax cuts proposed, which include decreasing income tax for all employed in IT from 20 to 5% of GDP in Armenia, which will imply that IT sector virtually will not pay any taxes. So this has, I think, major issues here. It's not only the justice that not everyone is equally paying, but here are some structural issues. First is we see that IT sector globally and locally in Armenia as well is the fastest growing sector in the economy. So this means that we subsidize the sector which is growing by itself, which is not adequate, I think. I mean, usually governments subsidize companies and sectors which are unsuccessful due to many structural reasons or are in trouble. But IT sector has grown last year 47%, and this year is growing even more, if I'm not mistaken, like 65% or something. So if the branch of economy grows, has a growth this fast, I don't understand why do we need to separately add up to that. Well, I might understand that there is a lobbying from IT companies. For example, when last year drum exchange rate has changed towards dollar and drum got more expensive, it caused problem for all exporting companies. and all exporting companies were discontent with these decisions, but only IT companies got some subsidies. Now, the same is happening here. As I said, any IT company which is exporting, which means virtually any IT company in Armenia, will get tax cut off by 75% compared to the current situation, which will mean that first of all, IT sector will increase in volume even faster. Maybe it will double every year. And at the same time, it will cause a problem to the economy, because the more you subsidize, the more effectively it's a burden on the budget. So it's a fiscal issue. Another issue is the issue with the connectivity, because IT sector in Armenia was completely structured as a sector which is export oriented. On one hand, it's good because it might bring currency to the country. Although, since it completely interacts with the global economy and has no local connection, it has very small added value to the economy, especially if the taxes are cut. So some money flows here, and then the same money flows there. What stays in Armenia? Very little. And that's why it effectively means that Armenia is subsidizing the global economy. The more Armenian IT sector has a connectivity with the global economy, which many think as a good thing, the more it will cause the problem. Because we can remember how in Soviet times, the Soviet Union was creating industries which were spread throughout the whole Soviet Union and were connecting different republics. So you could not produce many things unless all of the Soviet republics are participating in this value chain production. And especially it was regarding the technology, the military industry, and some stuff like that. So, and machinery. And now, more or less the same is happening here. So, effectively, Armenia is connected to the global economy without any guarantee that it will be stable. So,
right.
the day there will be issue with connectivity with the global economy, or within the technological sector worldwide, Armenian economy might collapse the very same way like it collapsed after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Because during the Soviet Union, during the Soviet Union, in Armenia, there was no Armenian economy, or virtually no Armenian economy. Mostly it was Soviet socialist economy located in Armenia. And now we are creating a cluster of global economy located in Armenia. And the level of localization is even less, because at that time it was industry. Now it's just people with internet connection.
Hovik,
Yes,
Hrant,
and
can you tell me who is benefiting from this tax policy? Is it Armenian IT companies? Is it, for example, the Russian transplant companies? Who is really reaping the benefits?
Well, I think that a lot of IT companies in Armenia, many companies have to be registered in Armenia. And I don't want to exclude the fact that there are some Armenian entrepreneurs who would benefit from this. But the fact is, like, it would benefit a single owner or a single pocket. What I want to highlight to follow up on what Hrant mentioned, if you have there is a huge need for high level, so for experienced programmers, for experienced security analysts at all companies in Armenia. That includes banks, that includes the government itself, which is constantly being hacked by Azerbaijan. But even here, the government will be put at a disadvantage because, or like a bank, let's say a bank, right? A bank would have to pay 20% tax, and therefore it would have to potentially pay more to hire these people. I don't know. Maybe I'm misunderstanding how the structure is. But would this mean that banks and other companies in Armenia would be disadvantaged in hiring the labor that is needed? And the other thing that I really think is the most important is that all, or most, if not all, major Armenian companies, when you say IT, people think of innovation, people think of AI, people think of these billion-dollar unicorns. Armenians are so naive to think that companies such as, PixArt, which was started in Armenia, or even Titan. Titan was started in Glendale. They think that those are Armenian companies. Meanwhile, or Service Titan. Meanwhile, all that's happening is Service Titan created an outsourcing center in Armenia. So yes, it employs some Armenian employees. By the way, employees who could be creating the next billion-dollar company, but they're here outsourcing for Service Titan. So the amount of value out of Service Titan's entire pie, let's say, of value that belongs to Armenia is very little, and that is just basically the number of employees and their multiplied by their productivity. The same thing with PixArt. PixArt started in Armenia, but as soon as it found some investors, it got reincorporated in the United States. And I don't want to single out PixArt or Service Titan, but those are just examples. PixArt got reincorporated in the United States and is viewed as a U.S. company, as all of its value is under the books of the U.S., except a small portion, which is the outsourcing center in Armenia for PixArt. So it's economically, it's very difficult, I think, to consider PixArt or Service Titan as Armenian companies, but people do. And that's the marketing lingo that is being used to justify further Armenian subsidies into the IT sector. What this is doing is locking up those employees that are really important, that are really smart, to be, basically providers of services to foreign companies, whereas they could be working in the Armenian defense sector. They could be working in the Armenian government sector. They could be working in Armenian companies that are really in need of modernization, and they need, in terms of technology, what they call digital transformation. All of these, are challenges for Armenian companies and Armenian government companies, which are not being met.
You guys were talking about connecting the Armenian IT sector to the global IT market, essentially industry out there. Is there enough of a market for the products of these companies in Armenia to sustain an Armenian IT company, or do they actually have to sell outside of the country to survive?
I think what Hrant means by global, and actually I want to sort of, maybe if I'm wrong, Hrant can correct me. I think what Hrant means by global companies is actually basically our product is the human labor. We're not even, most of the time, Armenia is not producing gadgets. It's not producing technology that can be licensed or sold. It is basically producing the sweat of the people who work here in order to support global corporations. And even if it is maybe there are some minor products that Armenian companies are selling, I don't know if Hrant knows specific examples, but 90% of Armenia basically is outsourcing human labor.
All right. So PixArt example definitely shows that, it was an Armenian company, which very quickly became a US company. So definitely here in this case, Armenia is subsidizing the global economy first. Second, as of today, it's already a significant portion of Armenian IT labor market is Russian citizens. So Armenia will subsidize them as well. So it means Armenia will subsidize Russians to work in IT and create products for US. Armenia is subsidizing Russians to work for US. What is added value for Armenia? And whoever will tell you that there is added value for Armenia, I can say definitely that for Armenian economy, it will be a burden. So
Hrant, all those companies that relocated from Russia to Armenia, at least temporarily during the war in Ukraine, are they actually benefiting from the IT tax benefits?
Definitely, they have been registered as Armenian companies, so they will get a tax benefit. Of course, some companies which are branches of foreign companies, maybe they will not get these tax benefits. Although I'm not sure, this needs to be checked. But any company, and Russian companies did that. which is registered as Armenian company, they will get the tax benefit.
Interesting. Okay, since we're talking about the economy here, let's talk a little bit about the Western sanctions on Russia affecting Armenia. As we know, Russia has been heavily sanctioned by the West since the war in Ukraine, and Armenia, fortunately, has remained largely unscathed by these sanctions until recently. The US called out a number of countries for evading sanctions. Mentioned were Turkey, Kazakhstan, Georgia, the United Arab Emirates, and Armenia. Not mentioned Azerbaijan, which is diverting Russian oil products and gas to Europe. And I just want to note here, we're not talking about a few millions like Armenia. In the case of Azerbaijan, we're talking about billions with a B. And I'm editorializing a little bit when I say that this is the type of selective and arbitrary favoritism that undermines the West's credibility with Armenians. Anyway, so far, 2 Armenian companies have been affected, and the government has tightened control on re-exporting of dozens of types of electronic products to Russia. And this week, Armenian banks began to block transactions with certain Russian companies that import materials from Armenia. How serious is the U.S. pressure in the absence of pressure on Azerbaijan? What effect will this have on Russian-Armenian trade, Hrant?
Well, we have our trade with Russia grown last year, and it is true that there was a significant portion of re-exporting of some materials and some equipment through Armenia to Russia, and we can observe it in our foreign trade. So Armenian exports towards Russia in the first 5 months of the year has achieved, in first 4 months of the year has achieved $1 billion, which is triple the regular size of the exports. So some added $600 to $700 million represents the re-export. At the same time, most of it is not what people think, which is microelectronics or so. It's in most cases it's car or some stuff like that. So consumer goods, which are some firms have banned exports to Russia of these consumer goods, including the vehicles, but still it's not electronics per se. Second thing is the banking sector, which again has served as some kind of safe haven for some Russian citizens. I'm not talking about those who were sanctioned, but the ordinary citizens, including those who have relocated to Armenia. And yes, we have seen that the Armenian banking sector last year has also grown some 48% or so, and also has grown its level of income even more significantly than the overall turnover. So it generated good income last year, but it was due to Russia's activity in Armenia. And now Armenian government has accepted that 10th package of sanctions, which has been imposed by the US government, which implies the secondary sanctions against countries which employ Russian companies or let them evade sanctions or stuff like that, which means that Armenian newly grown foreign trade and financial flow with Russia will decline again. All of that caused additional some 4% of GDP growth last year, and probably the same amount this year. So it might happen that we might lose this additional growth, which is first concern. Second concern is that it might affect the political relations with Russia. On the one hand, we have seen that after some Pashinyan statements against Russia, last month Russians have banned Armenian milk industry from exporting to Russian market, and now we see this limitations on Russian businesses in Armenia. We have seen some businesses closing down last week, and some people reopening bank accounts. Some people who have relocated here reopening bank accounts, but on other conditions. So I think it will affect the economy. The Pashinyan has stated on May 15, basically 1 month ago, that yes, the risk of falling under secondary sanctions is a red line for Armenian economy, he said. So he is prioritizing the relations with US, economic relations with US over relations with Russia. But at the same time, we should understand that if US really bans Armenia or US-related all, let's say, West will ban Armenia from trading with US, it will not help Russia anyway. So I think now the pressure on Armenia has increased to stop any, let's say, exceeding the regular economic relations with Russia. And so did Kazakhstan. So it's not only Armenia. But anyway, I think it will affect Armenian economy, and I think it will cost Armenian economy several percents of economic growth in the foreseeing future, let's say, by the end of this year.
So one of the topics that was discussed in Sochi around when Pashinyan met with Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin was proposals from Russia for building a new nuclear power plant for Armenia. This one that Russia is proposing is 1,200 megawatt, while the US has recently also proposed modular reactors for Armenia on the scale of, I think, 465 megawatts. There is also potentially Armenia, we heard, is considering Chinese nuclear power plants as well. One of the major considerations in deciding to even build nuclear power plants, in my opinion, is the economic one. Because, you know, from what I understand, the nuclear power plant has to generate a certain amount of electricity in order to remain, you know, in the black. So can Armenia find a big enough distribution market for electricity it might generate? There's also fears that because it would have to basically be given monopolistic rights to sell electricity ahead of other electricity generators, which would mean potential rise in electricity costs. What are your thoughts in terms of should Armenia have a nuclear power plant, and how can Armenia make it economically feasible to build a nuclear power plant? Because it's also seen as, in many ways, as a security, you know, energy security guarantee for Armenia.
It's a very long story, because on one hand, nuclear power plant can be a provider of energy security to the country, because it produces lots of energy, which cannot be cut off like a pipeline, which has been cut off to Armenia in the beginning of 90s. So everyone knows in Armenia how turning on the nuclear power plant in Metsamor brought electricity to the homes of 3 million people in Armenia in 1995 and 1996. So it makes difference. At the same time, I should note that nuclear power plant might still be very vulnerable, especially given that Azerbaijan and Turkey might target it when and if there is some conflict in the area. So this consideration should also be taken into account. Another thing which refers to just economy is that what amount of electricity does Armenia need? On one hand, Armenia produces more or less the same amount as it consumes. It exports a bit to Persian market. Technically, it can export even more to Turkish market, although Turkey does not buy Armenian electricity, but at least Armenia has some capacity to sell to Turkey, to produce more and sell to Turkey. So here is, the issue of market is a real issue, but another issue regarding the market is a local market, because the fossil fuels, in my view, are not very sustainable in the long term, and we might even see the switch towards electricity generally. First of all, regarding the cars, vehicles, and second, regarding to the heating of buildings. Because if we look at electricity cost, the nuclear power is about 7 or 8 times less expensive in Armenia than power generated by other sources, energy sources. So nuclear energy is very cheap energy.
Hrant, does that include
important.
Russian gas generated power?
Yeah, it is much less expensive than the power which is generated by Russian, with processing Russian gas. So, and also we should understand that gas is important. Of course, the uranium is also imported, but the amount of uranium imported is much less, and much more is, let's say, a reproduction here. So, in this way, I think Armenia might switch a bit or even significantly from fossil fuels to nuclear energy in the future. And I think it might happen not only in Armenia, by the way. So the need in electric energy will increase, in my view. So, of course, we need additional studies here, but I think the market primarily it will be local market. So this is one part of the story. Another part of the story is where Armenia will get the money to build the nuclear power plant, which let's say 10 years ago it was assessed as $5 billion needed to construct one, and now most probably it will require 8 billions or maybe even 10 billions. So I don't think Armenia has enough money to supply this construction, unless there will be a big investment. So it's another part of the story, the amount of investment. And given that Metsamor will work at least until 2036, it's not very urgent issue as of now. Of course, it will require some 10 years to construct, but still, I don't see it starting a new construction like within next 5 years. Another thing is who will build the nuclear power plant.
That's what I was going to say, because it creates a geopolitical dependency, whether it's Russia or the US, right?
That's right.
Yeah, definitely. And also, there was an American proposition of a small nuclear power plant. What I have read was 300 megawatts of energy, even less than 465, which you have quoted. So probably there are several options, but still it's completely different project than Russian one. There was a Russian project of 1200 megawatts, and then the French project of 1 gigawatt or 1000 megawatts. So currently, I think what I have read in the press, Armenian government would like to support the American plan with small nuclear power plants. But still, I think it's, although this selection seems to also be the politically motivated, but still, I don't see any major changes here within next, let's say, 3 to 5 years. Still, okay. I don't think it's going to happen soon or any soon.
Regardless of the decision, we need to be aware that these decisions will affect the future of Armenia for the next century. I mean, just think about Metsamor, that's been around for 50 years. Current technology allows these reactors to live for the next century or so.
Yeah, and by the way, there is there is radiophobia. Many people are afraid of nuclear energy, but even Metsamor's nuclear safety level has been increased during last decade. So now it's really safe. It's really safe based on many metrics which have been conducted in 2012, 2015, and 2018. So even Metsamor is safe, and not to talk about newer reactors although we don't know which exact reactor Armenian government will choose, and then we will have to check which cases of usage of this reactor are in the place. But anyway, I think, yeah, you're right that it's also a very long-standing decision.
Yeah, Hrant, thank you for those discussions. There was a new poll released this week by MPG, one of the main pollsters in Armenia, and it surveyed sentiment of the public regarding various foreign policy related issues in the Pashinyan government. The poll was conducted between May 27th and May 31st, so just 2-3 weeks ago. Its margin of error is plus or minus 2%. As a summary, this poll indicates a deep divide between the policy of the Nikol Pashinyan regime and sentiments of the Armenian public. But let's dive into details. Maybe not everything is so apparent after all. I've tried to group some of the questions into major themes. So one of the two questions in the poll were related to the policies on the status of Artsakh. One question asked, Nikol Pashinyan declared that he recognized Azerbaijan's 86.6 thousand square kilometers. And how would you react to this? So, it phrased it in terms of the square kilometers. The second one, whether it was people found it possible or impossible for Artsakh to be in Azerbaijan. In both cases, so in the first case, basically 9.2% of the people said either positive or very positive regarding Pashinyan's statement about the 86,600 square kilometers, while 72.3% said negative or very negative. On the second question, whether it's possible for Artsakh to be part of Azerbaijan, 8.4% said possible, and 86.4% or nearly 90% said impossible, with a small 5% saying, that it's difficult to answer. So with nearly 90% of Armenians saying that it is impossible for Artsakh to be part of Azerbaijan, how is this regime exactly planning on implementing this policy, which it has been expressed unequivocally by Pashinyan, Simonian, and many others that make up this government?
This opinion poll reveals the picture that is, let's say, first time we see very exact and explicit effect of Pashinyan's policy on Artsakh, affecting his approval rate, because usually people tended to divide his internal or domestic politics and foreign policy. So this time we see that there is a strict effect, because we also see his approval rate declining. Approval rate of Pashinyan, which has been just 1 month before his statements, anti-Artsakh statements, just 1 month before that, his approval rate was 38%, and now it's 19%. So
right,
effectively it's halved, which is very important change. It never happened with Pashinyan. Pashinyan has never had approval rate of 19%. It's the same level of support which Sargsyan had in, let's say, in 2015 to 2018. So this is one major change. Another major change is that, when people were asked before Pashinyan's anti-Artsakh statements, how they would assess, let's say, Artsakh being incorporated in Azerbaijan, the last poll, which took place after the first stage of Azerbaijani blockade in late December 2022, 97.4% of people said that Artsakh cannot live in Azerbaijan. Now there were 86.4%, so 11% less. Nevertheless, it is still a lot. Why it is a lot? Because when asked, Pashinyan said that he recognizes Azerbaijan's territorial integrity, including Artsakh in Azerbaijan. 83% of people said they don't agree. Because usually people have their own view of this or that issue, regardless of opinion of authorities. But if you put them into contradiction with authorities, especially in Armenia, people tend to agree with authorities. For example, the same issue we had with Amulsar, which people were against of operating of Amulsar gold mine in near Jermuk. And since Pashinyan started pushing to reoperating or operating of this golden mine several months ago, people started agreeing with that. And another case is when Ruben Vardanyan was appointed as a prime minister in Artsakh, or state minister to be exact. At that time, a majority supported him, even majority in Armenia. But when Ruben Vardanyan was dismissed by the government, and generally this dismissal was supported by Armenian government, majority has also supported him being removed out of his office. So whatever government says, people, let's say, slight majority, not vast majority, but still slight majority, tends to support. And this is first time when vast majority, very significant majority, you cannot find this type of majority which is opposing government on any issue in any country, I would say. I don't remember such cases. Opposes his foreign policy. And now, regarding the issue how Pashinyan is pushing for this agenda, despite the fact that majority opposes him, is that first, he does not face structural opposition to this decision. I'm not saying about opposition parties, but I mean the opposing movements which are pushing him on the ground. So, of course, we see some initiatives, including, for example, Hayakve initiative, where people are trying to gather signatures for criminalizing recognition of Artsakh in any other state. So, and there are some other initiatives like that, but still, it's not a people-gathered industry. And this is the only language Pashinyan understands. So at this time, since the streets are relatively calm, Pashinyan thinks that that he might push for this agenda. Moreover, it's Azerbaijan which does not want to have agreement on so-called territorial integrity issue. But Pashinyan wants to have it, because for Pashinyan it's very important to get this agreement as soon as possible, until people started opposing it directly and very loudly. So Pashinyan is afraid that people will consolidate, and until that happens, he will try to sign everything and to make this as a fact that it's already late to counteract. So anyway, we should be aware that a vast majority, very significant majority of Armenian population is not only against Artsakh being Azerbaijan, but even they are against Artsakh being part of Azerbaijan, even despite the fact that it's Pashinyan, whom many of them supported, let's say, a month ago. So this is the most important out of this poll.
Yes.
If you have any other questions, I can add up.
If you want to have the last word about this poll, any other major things that caught your attention? If not, then we can finish up.
Well, just one thing. When asked about their opinion on the so-called revolution, which took place 5 years ago, this time it was the all-time low of support towards this revolution.
Yeah, many people forgot. They said, let me cite those numbers to be specific. So they asked, did you participate in the revolution of 2018? 37.4% said yes. But in the same poll, back in 2018, 91% had said yes. So apparently people have forgotten, or what's going on here?
Well, that's one part, that people tend to remember what they consider to be important or to be correct or to be right thing to do. And at that time, people who would support that so-called revolution with posts on Facebook. They said, I supported the revolution, and they entered 91%. And now only those who have had some kind of active support, only them stated that they supported. But there is more important point there. When asked to which extent your expectations of the revolution have been met, this time 70% said they were not met, which in September 2018, it was only 18.5% who said the expectations have not been met. In May 2019, up to 30% said their expectations were not met. And even in November 2021, 56% said their expectations were not met. So now it's 70%. So revolution has been completely delegitimized in these years. So it shows the overall trend of policy, even despite the fact that many of those who say they participated in the revolution, they are now discontent with its results. So what is important here is that Pashinyan is losing his core support, which has been like 1/3 of the population, and now he's losing even that. I think it's just 10 to 15% core support which he's retaining. It is very significant change which took place during last month.
On my part, I wanted to note the question about the Nemesis monument. If you recall, Turkey applied a lot of pressure on Pashinyan's government to remove the Nemesis monument. The poll asks if the government should buck to that Turkish pressure and remove it. Over 90% said no, and 82.5% said absolutely no. And this comes in the face of Pashinyan spinelessly responding to Turkish pressure by saying, oh, the monument was built by the Yerevan municipal government, basically finger pointing, and that it was the wrong thing to do.
So this also means that this so-called peaceful policy or concessions policy does not have any support in the public opinion.
Agreed.
And by the way, it never had a support. So this is also very important to understand, because Pashinyan tries to emulate support, showing some marginalized people who were paid for to show that they support his capitulation policy, but at the same time, the real society, which can be measured or can be seen, with whom you can talk, they don't support any kind of this policy, which is important to understand, because some politicians are also looking at this fake stories, and they are blaming the people. They are saying that the people is not good, which is completely incorrect, which is completely wrong to do.
All right. Let's wrap up our topics here. I'd like to ask each of you, Hovik, Hrant, if there's been something on your mind this past week that you want to share with us. Hovik, what's on your mind? You go first this week.
Yet another week where we see scandals and abuse by authorities. In just 1 week, we saw news about physical abuse of citizens by authorities, including pictures of the police knocking out someone who was at the wine festival. In Aragatavan, a civil contract official beat up an epileptic citizen, first spraying gas on the citizen, then using a club to beat up the citizen. That same person, who is a civil contract official, boasted on Facebook how he ejected a 7-year-old refugee from Artsakh in the middle of nowhere from his car, where he was giving a ride to this kid, because the kid essentially, apparently or allegedly, blamed Nikol Pashinyan for giving away Artsakh. And on June 7, a citizen who entered the Gyumri City Hall for official business about his construction was beaten up and taken out of the building on a stretcher. And according to media reports, his sister was told that, we're civil contract and we dictate the laws. If this is not the return of the 1990s, I don't know what it is. I think that the only difference is now that the Pashinyan regime has, more effective command of the media and the messaging, and they have support from the outside, because I don't see how this would be tolerated in any other case.
Okay. Hrant, is there anything on your mind you would like to share with us?
Yeah, I want to go on with the same topic. There have been charges against Mr. Vermishan, who had been head of the urban planning committee, and he was sentenced to 8 years. And this is completely made up story. There also has been a charge against Gayane Hakopian, who is mother of a victim of the war. First of all, there was a decision of the court that she should be released, and then there was another decision, probably affected by the call to the court. So also we see some other trends, and generally what we see is Pashinyan is sorry.
Yeah,
How
what's
to
the word?
break the law. So Pashinyan is breaking every. Yeah, should I say break the law? I mean,
Yeah, of course. You can say that.
Pashinyan. So okay, so Pashinyan government, being the official government in Armenia as of now, is breaking every possible law, not to add up the stories regarding corruption and drugs dissemination. By the way, we have 200% growth of drug dissemination cases according to criminal statistics, and we have observed these 4 tons of drugs imports to Armenia. Some of that has been caught in Italy and so on. So as of now, what I see is Armenia is completely covered by lawlessness in every possible form. So the government is like hunting for every possible law to break it. And this is shocking, to be frank. I know no one is expecting that Pashinyan will follow the laws, but still, this last couple of months, it's a total mess.
Okay, well, we're going to leave it there for today on that happy note. Thank you, Hrant, for joining us. We'll talk to you very soon.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Ranjan.
That's our show this week. We hope you found it useful. Please follow us on social media. We'll talk to you next week.